It's interesting in the last few chapters how much ground that we have covered. A lot of the focus for quite a few chapters has been on Abraham and Sarah, and then we saw Sarah pass away, and then last chapter we saw Isaac find his wife. And then in this episode, we begin the chapter 25, talking about Abraham, and by the end of chapter 25, uh, Isaac and his sweetheart Rebecca have twin sons. This chapter seems to cover more ground than some of the recent chapters, which seem to move quite slowly. Papa John's Scripture Notes Project, again, we're trying to understand the Bible as far as it is translated correctly. And I hope you enjoy having scholars from different backgrounds and faiths. It really helps me to study, not stutter, but to study with insights from different backgrounds. It helps me appreciate what I have more and understand the similarities in the faith of my friends of other faiths, and makes me appreciate in some way additional insights to know what I have that perhaps they don't have in the light of the restored gospel. But yet I'm learning from them too, and I appreciate that. Genesis chapter 25. Then again, Abraham took a wife, and her name was Keturah, and she bare him Zimron and Jokshan and Medan and Midian and Ishbak and Shuah. Our Hebrew scholar Nehemiah Gordon. Here's an interesting little tidbit. He says, we see the sons of Keturah. She is essentially the third wife of Abraham. After Sarah dies and Hagar is gone, one of her sons is Midian. That's significant because later, when Moses flees from Egypt, we're talking generations from now, he goes to the land of Midian, and there he meets the descendants of Abraham. Jethro was a Midianite, a descendant of Abraham. So this is interesting and good to know. I'm going to skip verse 3 and 4 because these names are difficult for me to read at times. In verse 5, and Abraham gave all that he had unto Isaac. Now Papa John adds a little note here to us. This may seem unfair, but understand in a way it was now Isaac's responsibility to take care of them if needed, he being the heir of Abraham. And if you didn't realize it, the firstborn, usually in the Hebrew culture, which is just beginning to develop here with Abraham, but eventually the firstborn inherits a double portion for that same reason. He gets twice as much as anyone else might get. Why? Because the firstborn is responsible for the women who do not receive an inheritance. So as the men receive inheritance, since the firstborn is responsible for those that may not receive as much, he's responsible. So that's already, we're seeing that right here. Verse 6, but unto the sons of the concubines which Abraham had, Abraham gave gifts and sent them away from Isaac his son, while he yet lived eastward unto the east country. Verse 7, and these are the days of the years of Abraham's life, which he lived, 180 years. He was 175 years old when he passed away. Verse 8, and Abraham gave up the ghost and died in a good old age, an old man and full of years, and was gathered to his people. Verse 9, and his sons, plural, Isaac and Ishmael. That's cool. Ishmael is there at the funeral. Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah and in the field of Ephron, the son of Zorah, the Hittite, which is before Mamre. Verse 10, the field which Abraham purchased of the sons of Heth, there was Abraham buried, and Sarah his wife. And it came to pass after the death of Abraham that Elohim blessed his son Isaac, and Isaac dwelt by the well in Lahoi Roi. Now, these are the generations of Ishmael, Abraham's sons, whom Hagar the Egyptian, Sarah's handmaid, bare unto Abraham. And again, I'm going to skip through those verses because of the difficult Old Testament names, but I would like to point out that in verse 16, uh, these are the sons of Ishmael, and these are their names by their towns and by their castles, 12 princes according to their nations. So I find that interesting that they had 12 tribes in a sense as well with the Ishmaelites or through Ishmael. Verse 17, and these are the years of the life of Ishmael. So already to hit the end of his life. That's how fast this chapter is moving. 137 years, and he gave up the ghost and died, and was gathered unto his people. Um, it's Old English in verse 17. These are the years of the life of Ishmael. And Joseph Smith just clarifies these are the number of years of the life of Ishmael. Verse 18, and they dwelt from Havilah unto Shur, that is before Egypt, as thou goest towards Assyria. And he died in the presence of all his brethren. And then verse 19, and these are the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham begat Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah or Rivkah to wife, the daughter of Bethuel, the Syrian of Paddan Aram, the sister to Laban the Syrian. And it sounds like, well, I think we're through all the end of life for a while. Now Isaac, in verse 21, entreated Jehovah for his wife, because she was barren, and Jehovah was entreated of him, and Rebekah his wife conceived. And in Joseph Smith's version of that, he says, instead of she was barren, he says that she might bear children because she was barren. Verse 22, and the children struggled together within her. And she said, if it be so, why am I thus? Joseph Smith says, if I am with child, why is it thus with me? And she went to inquire of Jehovah. Our Hebrew scholar adds this, and she went to seek Jehovah, or in Hebrew, and I can't even begin. There it is. Someday I'll be able to read it. And basically, it's just what we read. And she went to seek Jehovah. What does that mean? She went to seek Jehovah. Where did she go? Did she go to a prophet? Did she go out in the field like Isaac had been doing when she first arrived, speaking while he was speaking to God in the field? Maybe she went out into the field and sought Jehovah. Then she gets this answer where he actually speaks to her. What a beautiful thing. And I agree with that. Our Methodist minister, Keith Johnson, says it's interesting that at some point after he gets married, they find out that Rebecca, she's barren. Isn't that interesting? I mean, just like Sarah. Isaac was 40, though. Our Methodist minister helps us understand Isaac was 40 when he took her as a wife. He was 60 when she finally had children. That's 20 years. He has prayed for a child for a long time, literally 20 years before she has these children. Yet that didn't change God's faithfulness. His timing is perfect, but 20 years is a long time to wait. We live in a very instant society. Microwaves, push button, phone calls, yet the Father, in his wisdom, has timing. This is part of who he is, and his timing is perfect. It was 20 years between the time Isaac married Rebekah and the time she had children. These verses read so quickly, but it was a 20-year wait. It's not always simple. It's not always quick. It's not always fast. But that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. Verse 23, and Yahovah said unto her, two nations. So she's asking, what's going on? And here's the answer. Two nations are in thy womb, and two manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels, and the one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger. Wow. And when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb. Jono Vandor from Australia. Two nations are in your womb. Obviously, through Jacob, we will eventually have Israel. But Esau, who is the nation of Esau today? Nehemiah, our Hebrew scholar, says it's tradition. I don't know, but it's tradition. I have great doubts about those identifications. Let me put it this way. Edom is, in Hebrew, Edom means red. What happened to the nation of Edom and what happened to the nation of Ishmael? So what Jewish tradition says is that Ishmael is the Arabs, then by extension the Muslims. That's not a secret. I mean, that's pretty well known. They certainly claim to be Ishmaelites, but Edom could be the Christians. Then how do we get that? How do they get that from Edom to Christians? Well, the Hebrew word Edom sounds very much like Rome. And in Hebrew, I believe it's pronounced delayed, D-A-L-E-T in English, Dalit, and Resh. And they're written in a way that's almost identical with the Hebrew letters. What happened is when Jews wanted to talk about Christianity, the Roman Empire, and later the Roman Catholic Church, they referred to it as Edom. You can actually find hints of this in the Dead Sea Scrolls. That's before Christianity, though, and they're referring to the Romans as Edom. That's simply because Edom sounds like Rome, and it's written almost identically in Hebrew. Rome and Edom are. So now, does that mean that Christians were Edomites? Jewish tradition historically identifies Edom as the Muslims and the Christians. Obviously, from a Jewish perspective, you have the Edomites and the Ishmaelites who are cousins. They're cousin nations. They're like us, but they're different. That's how Jews have historically seen the Muslims and the Christians. Both Muslims and Christians claim at least that they believe in the Torah of Moses, but then in practice they don't really actually observe it. So from the Jewish perspective, they are similar to us, but different. They didn't really mean it literally that the Muslims are Ishmael and the Christians are Edom, but symbolically, at the very least. You'll find in numerous ancient Jewish sources, some of them 2,000 years old, they'll talk about Edom and they'll mean the Roman Empire, and then later that meant the Roman Catholic Church. There's actually some historical evidence about things that have happened to the Edomites and then the Ishmaelites. That's a whole separate discussion. If you say to an ultra Orthodox Jew in Jerusalem, those horrible Edomites, he knows exactly what you're talking about. You mean the Christians. If you say those horrible Ishmaelites or those wonderful Ishmaelites or wonderful Edomites, he knows exactly who you're talking about. That's Jewish culture. Does that mean it's biblically true? Good question. That's definitely how it's been identified historically. Our Methodist minister, Keith, this is the power of this collaboration, having what the traditions are in the background and also what our understanding is in terms of Scripture. And then Nehemiah, our Hebrew scholar, adds, and just one little sort of poignant note, boy. The entire book of Obadiah is about the restriction, or no, the retribution that will be upon the Edomites in the end times, and or at some point in the future anyway. It hasn't happened yet. That has been understood by Jewish sources as referring to what will happen to Rome and then by extension the Roman Catholic Church. I would never have known that because I've never looked at it in that light. So it's interesting to see what the Hebrew culture thinks about who the Rome and the Roman Catholic Church are as the horrible Edomites. Verse 25, and then the first, referring back to the twins, the first came out red all over like a hairy garment, and they called his name Esau. Nehemiah says he's impressively hairy, and it would appear to be red or reddish. That's one of the reasons he later gets the name Edom, because Edom means red. Verse 26, and after that came his brother out, and his hand took hold of Esau's heel, and his name was called Jacob. And Isaac was 80 years old when she bare them. So now he's 60 years old. Nehemiah, the significance of the name is the word for heel. So Jacob means heel, Akiv. And the name Jacob, or in Hebrew, Yaakov, from the same root. So Yaakov could literally be translated as he heals or he grabs the heel, and is essentially the explanation for the name of Jacob. Verse 27, and the boys grew, and Esau was a cunning hunter, a man of the field, and Jacob was a plain man, dwelling in tents. Nehemiah, he says, this means Jacob was a shepherd, whereas Esau, or Esau, with a V on the end, was a hunter. You go out into the desert where they lived and what today is the Israel's Negev desert. In those days, you had herds of hundreds of thousands of gazelles and antelope and even deer. They could go out and hunt, but it was a grueling task to hunt these animals. Whereas Jacob, presumably dwelling in tents, means that he's following his domesticated herds in the tent, which would then be he would be a shepherd. The reason I think that is in the reason I think that is in Genesis chapter 4 verse 20 where it says I'm going to skip the Hebrew. In English, he was the father of all those who dwelt in a tent. Mikanu kana, or a flock, or those who have flocks. So dwelling in a tent and having flocks in the Hebrew mind, those are synonymous. You dwell in a tent when you have flocks because your flocks will overgraze the entire area, and then you have to move on. And yes, eventually the vegetation grows back, but it's seasonal. Verse 28, and we're already close to the end. And Isaac loved Esau. So Isaac's favorite son is Esau, and it says because he did eat of his venison. So Isaac loved his venison when he came back from hunting. But Rebekah loved Jacob. 29, and Jacob sawed pottage. So he made some pottage. And Esau came from the field, and he was faint. And Esau said to Jacob, feed me, I pray thee, with some red pottage, for I am faint. Therefore was his name called Edom. I suppose that's because the play on words is red and Edom, uh, as Nehemiah told us. Uh, it's a play on words, meaning the pottage is red, and so is his name in a sense because of his red hair. Verse 31, and Jacob said, sell me this day thy birthright. And Esau said, behold, I am at the point to die, and what profit shall this birthright do to me? Joseph Smith says, behold, I am at the point of dying, and what shall this birthright profit me? It's a little better for the English we're used to there. Verse 33, and Jacob said, swear unto me this day, and he sware unto him, and he sold his birthright unto Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and pottage of lentils, and he did eat and drink, and rose up and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. I think that's trying to communicate he took lightly his birthright in the moment that he was so hungry. Now, Jono Vandor says, these are fascinating verses where Jacob says, sell me your birthright as of this day. Esau said, look, I'm about to die. Clearly he's famished. Then Jacob said, swear to me as of this day. So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. And Jacob gave Esau bread and stew of lentils. Then he ate and drank, arose and went on his way. And Esau despised his birthright. What are the implications of that, Nehemiah? And Nehemiah responds, he didn't value it, and so he sold it, literally, for a bowl of red lentil soup. And red lentils is a play on words. Edom means red, and also it's a type of lentils or red lentils. So that's where you get the name Edom, the birthright of the firstborn. It's really interesting what that is. The birthright of the firstborn in the Bible and in ancient times, and confirmed in the Torah, in Deuteronomy, is a double portion. Theoretically, let's say there were 99 sheep. So according to having the birthright, Esau was supposed to get 66 of the sheep, and Jacob would have gotten 33 of the sheep because Esau was the firstborn. He would have gotten the double portion. Our Methodist minister Keith says, on one thing that's really, really interesting here is that Jacob didn't sit down and say, listen, here's the deed to your birthright, or here's the contract. He simply said, swear to me. So he swore an oath to him. And again, we see the significance of swearing. The fact is, regardless of what many say about Esau in terms of him selling his birthright, he understood what it meant to swear an oath. When he swore, he knew that would close the deal, and that's exactly what happened. He didn't come later and say, where's the written deed? Where's the contract? Where did I sign that says I owe you? No, he knows. He said it. You almost wonder if he didn't swear by the name, the divine name. Nehemiah responds, yes, in biblical times they swore No, I'm not sure. Hi Yehovah, which means as Yehovah lives. That was the common way of swearing. Presumably, if he swore an oath, he was saying, in the name of the God of Israel, the God, our God Jehovah, or at the time, the God of Isaac and of Abraham. So presumably he did and understood it to be a legally binding act. Throughout the Torah, there is the incredible weight of the binding word, the binding power of words. And the last insight is from Papa John. This type of omitting the name of God or swearing on some lesser being or object as a way to not keep an oath is what Christ addressed in his famous Sermon on the Mount. And we'll study that in Matthew chapter 5, and it's also referenced in James chapter 5. And James chapter 5 is an important chapter in the restored gospel. I just hope my children and my grandchildren and great-grandchildren and future posterity and extended family and friends, I hope our recent prophet who passed away, Elder Nelson, he always in recent years talked about think celestial. And to me, that means think above the daily demands of the day, or think past your thirstiness or your hunger, your flesh. Think past your flesh. And I guess my hope is that we remember who we are, and we don't take lightly our birthright. We are born in the image of God. He made us after His own image. We have more value than perhaps we feel as we're going through just the minutia and the daily demands of each day requires of us just to survive. I hope that means something to you. I thank you for your time again for today's episode, and I'll talk to you again soon. I will close out with the fade out music.